What a test match, and what an ending. South Africa against Ireland, the second test, it has just finished. It was incredible, and that's what we're talking about in this video. But click off this video if you're looking to avoid the result. Now is your warning. Come back once you are caught up and enjoy it, by the way, because what a performance. What a result for this Ireland team. The drop goal at the death, the final play of the game to win it, the drop goal to put them back in touching distance as well in a second half where I felt like all of the momentum was with South Africa. So welcome back to the channel. Go in the comments section, let me know what you made of that game. Where was it won, where was it lost, but just your general thoughts, because that was sensational, I thought. As a neutral, I absolutely loved it. Also, whilst you're here, like the video and hit subscribe. If you haven't already, then make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'll open up with this. Ireland's greatest win? Arguably. I was chatting to an Irish journo last week who said if Ireland were to win this weekend, this drawn series would be the best achievement so far in Andy Farrell's tenure, which is a pretty big statement given the fact it's a side that also won a 3-match series away in New Zealand, that got themselves to #1 in the world, that have won Six Nations Grand Slams and back-to-back Six Nations titles. But he felt because of the way Ireland were up against it at the end of a long season, with the injuries they have, the key players that they were missing, this would be the greatest achievement. What do you reckon? There's a pretty compelling argument for it is, because they're playing against the world champions. As great as that New Zealand series win was, and it was historic, it was incredible, that was a New Zealand team that weren't playing that well, that were at probably one of their lowest ebbs for years. This is the world champions. This is South Africa in Durban in their own backyard. So let me know. I can understand the argument if you think this is the greatest ever win for Ireland and certainly the best win of the Andy Farrell era. But overall, fair play to both sides because South Africa absolutely played their part in this. It was a great test match. It was full-blooded. It was physical. You don't always get that on these tours because it's the end of the season for, well, certainly for the South African and obviously the European teams. I felt like it even went up a notch from last week. Like last week was great and was physical. This just seemed even better. It seemed more intense. The physicality even better. I think probably a big part of that actually was because last week we know the box brought the physicality. I think Ireland were a tad off where they would have wanted to be. And I think a big part of the reason that they ended up winning this week is just how they were able to compete physically a lot better. But all areas of the Irish game, if we're being honest, I think were better. They were physically better. Their attack was far better. We saw more of that in the first half rather than the second, but they just looked more joined up, more cohesive. I don't know, it's just because they had a game under their belt or exactly the reason for that, but that looked better, and defensively they looked better as well. All round for Ireland, I think they improved pretty much every area of the game. They were helped out in some regards, I felt. I felt in particular the Springbok kicking game in the first half really played into Ireland's hands. The kicks were too long. They weren't really getting enough distance on, or they were too long in terms of the chase, but they weren't pinning Ireland back enough. So wave after wave of Ireland pressure were coming at South Africa. So I think South Africa didn't help themselves in that regard. And Ireland had a great first half. What was it, half time, leading 16-6. And then that second half, I wrote down on my notes here, it was like 44 minutes Pollard penalty, 48 minutes Pollard penalty, 52, 55, just Pollard penalties over and over. And it got to the point where I felt like South Africa got themselves in the game, and it would have been another occasion where we'd have been saying, do you know what, fair play to this South African team, because when they're not their best, they're still able to pull these results out, and they almost did it. They got themselves back into it in the second half. They had the momentum, they built the pressure. I love the way they chip away at the score, but now upon reflection, I just wonder whether any part of the narrative after this game will be, should they have kicked for the corner? I mean, it's the ultimate Monday morning quarterback, isn't it, really? Because it looked like chipping away at the score and Pollard being so good from the kicking tee was going to be enough for them until that late drama. 24-25, it finished. Frawley with the drop goal. And it was actually, I wrote down here, I suppose a big thing was kind of what changed in the game, like what changed in the second half. Ireland, I thought, were excellent in the first half. South Africa were very, very good in the second half. But what actually changed to change that momentum? Because some games, there's something really obvious. I was struggling to think for this game exactly what was different. The World Cup semi-final between South Africa and England is a good example of this, where you say, what changed in that game? The replacements came on and South Africa dominated the scrum. They they earned scrum penalties, kicked themselves downfield and kicked points. In this game, there's not that obvious thing that changed in that second half. I think it was probably a combination of everything. South Africa were more accurate and more disciplined, and Ireland were the opposite of that. They were less disciplined, they were less accurate, and yeah, they looked a bit flustered, actually, I thought. There were moments in that second half I thought Ireland looked flustered. I expected South Africa to be able to see the game out. But that's why we love it, right? Because it was just incredible. There was a really good example, actually, of I felt Ireland having the game slip away from them. It was 69 minutes, and it was just after Pollard had kicked it into a, what would it have been, 5-point lead. So a penalty wasn't enough anymore for Ireland. And they kicked for the corner, and then they mess up the line out, completely mess up the line out, but they got away with it and were awarded a free kick. They then messed it up by getting held over the line. And that was a really good example, I thought, of how Ireland had just lost control of the test match. But what happened from the goal line dropout? Pollard didn't quite get a hold of it. Frawley picked it up or got the ball and sent over a drop goal, and we were back to that one-score game. But there were others as well, even in the final 10 minutes or so. There was a wide pass for James Lowe that went straight into touch. Frawley had a kick pass that he sent out on the full. All of these moments that I thought, Ireland are blowing it. Ireland are letting this slip away. But if there is one thing about this Andy Farrell Ireland team, and this I think is the epitome of that, is when their back is against the wall, to be able to pull something out. We saw that in that New Zealand series they won when they lost the first test relatively comfortably to come back and win it 2-1. And here in this game, like all logic for me on that second half was that South Africa were going to pull away and were going to win it. But they held in there, and that was an incredibly dramatic ending. From a South African point of view, where does this leave them? Look, they're the world champions. They've gone toe-to-toe with Ireland, who are the best team from the Northern Hemisphere, on 2 consecutive test matches. They've won one of those test matches, and frankly, we'll look back at this one and feel they should have seen it out. They know a small percentage points here or there and they'd get themselves over the line. But I guess it's just a reminder of how they're in a great place, but they have to keep improving it, looking ahead to the Rugby Championship. Their scrum still looks incredibly strong. I feel like their defence has looked pretty good. I know Conor Murray scored that great try for Ireland today, but generally Ireland didn't look like crossing the try line too often. So the scrum and the defence is still there. Has the attack just dropped off a little bit from the box? Looking back to last year or the year or so before the World Cup, where that started to be a little bit more expansive. I mean, they broke through in this game. They had opportunities, but yeah, didn't quite cut Ireland apart as much as they needed to or should have done in that second half. I'm not sure. I'm trying to put my finger on it, but let me know what you make of it. They haven't quite hit their straps yet. They're good because Ireland are a very, very good team. They're the 2 best teams in the world, but I think Rassie Erasmus will want them to go up a level or so as they build into the rest of this season. One of the big questions actually personnel-wise for South Africa, this is my final point before I'll round up, was Faf de Klerk. Wasn't his best game. I mentioned the kicking in the first half. That was a lot of his box kicks. I thought Grant Williams looked good when he came on. Are we getting to the point where Grant Williams is going to be the starter? Or is it just a one-off game? Faf has been there and done it. Stick with him. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to consider. The final thing I will say, and I can speak here as a neutral, very much a neutral, is I love it that this series was drawn. Because had South Africa won it 2-0, it would kind of drawn a line under this little rivalry, whereas I feel like this just keeps it going when they next meet each other. Like the fact that it's a drawn series, the fact that one apiece, personally, I absolutely love it. I think it's great for this rivalry, and I think it's great for the sport as well, with where it is at the moment and where these 2 teams are. So hopefully that is some sort of coherent narrative right on the full-time whistle. Game didn't finish that long ago. Ultimately, fair play to the Boks and fair play to Ireland for producing one of the best test matches, probably the best test match, arguably, we've seen this year. I suppose the England-Ireland game at Twickenham was pretty great, but this was right up there. So comment down below what you make of it, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.